C, A minor, G.
On the way to the cross, Jesus stopped and took so many personal detours to show us the way, the truth, and the life.
On the way to the cross, Jesus gathered 12 ordinary men to teach and disciple.
They were common people, even outcasts. No one thought they were exceptional.
But Jesus did. He called each one by name, made it personal, and said,
Follow me.
on the way to the cross, Jesus was going to heal a sick child when a woman in need of healing of her own touched his robe. Although Jesus was pressed for time, he stopped and asked,
Who touched me?
From the crowd steps this shy, apologetic woman, explaining what she had done and hoping she was not in trouble. She was in a state of shock when the Son of God made it personal and said,
Woman, because of your faith, you are healed.
On the way to the cross, Jesus went out of his way to comfort the family and friends of Lazarus, feeling their pain. Jesus wept also. The compassion he showed was astounding. But it didn't stop there. He called for him.
Lazarus, come out!
and Lazarus did just that, walked out of the tomb, alive and well. Jesus called him by name. You cannot get any more personal than that. Think of this. If he had just said, come out, a legion of dead people could have risen from the grave. Not only did he have the power to raise the dead, he had the power to make a personal connection. That's your cue.
Into this microphone.
Okay.
I can imagine what that must have felt like. Lazarus come out. To be dead and be called by the author of life to come back. When I think about my story, my addiction, I really can imagine it. I can feel it in my soul. Of course, I can remember the highs of addiction. After else, how else would an addict start out? Certainly not at the bottom. Certainly not dead inside. Certainly not dead in so many aspects of their life. But drugs became life to me after a long love affair with the high. And if drugs were life to me, then cocaine certainly became my heart. There wasn't anything I wanted more. There wasn't anything I wouldn't do. Cocaine replaced every other love I'd ever had. And even the love that I'd had from my own life. You see, it started with parties and people, but it ended alone. It started with lights and music, but it ended with silence. Empty rooms, quiet concentration on the love of my life. Everyone else had been shut out because there just wasn't enough for all of us. I couldn't share, but yet I couldn't be satisfied either. By the time the end had come, I had been warned by people who used to go blow for blow that I was way out of control. I'd steal for coke. I'd stay awake for days for coke. I would bleed for coke, and I'd crawl on hands and knees for coke. I wouldn't eat for coke. I would lie for coke, and I would hurt people that loved me for coke. I would trade everything for coke, and I had traded everything for coke. And what did coke do for me? She left me dead inside. Feelings for others that were deadened. A feeling of self-preservation that was dead. A future that was dead. Dreams that were dead. An empty bag and a plummet from the cloud that I was on. There was a jail cell and a cold floor, a phone call, and a cold reality. But despite all of this, I still needed her. Cocaine. Her voice was always there, and in ways, always is. This is where another voice came in. There at the end, in the dark, a cocaine addict willing to peel flesh off a bone for her. Cocaine. I heard his voice. The voice of Jesus like Lazarus had heard. I heard it through people that loved me enough to say that right where I was, he loved me. Dirty, addicted, selfish, a thief, a liar, a wreck. He loved me. I heard him in my mama's voice. I heard him in my girlfriend's, now wife's voice. I heard him in so many voices of love that I knew he had called to me. He had heard the cries of a mama. He had heard Esther, my wife's cries. He had heard a grandmother's tears hit the counter in her home in Bradenton, Florida. And he came. And he comforted. And he has caused my life to be changed by his call. To start new like Lazarus, from death to life. Because of what he did on the cross. Because he's still doing it today, right where we are. He's calling our name.
On the way to the cross, Jesus experienced opposition from many religious leaders. One Pharisee trying to stump him asked, "What is the greatest commandment of them all?" Jesus had a simple response, that it gave us our most important personal responsibility we have as his followers.
Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself.
On the way to the garden, Jesus was cornered on the way. On the cross, Jesus was cornered in the garden by one of his disciples. For just 30 silver coins, Judas betrayed the Son of God with a kiss on the teeth. Yet Jesus called him friend. Jesus made it personal, offering forgiveness rather than judgment. The guards surrounded him, and the long night began.
On the way to the cross, Jesus was arrested, whipped, beaten, even spit upon. He listened as the world around him threw insult at his majestic claim. The angry mob made it very personal.
On the way to the cross, condemned and about to be crucified, Jesus would speak to the mourners personally, even though he was the one beaten and bruised, making the long trek to Golgotha.
When we came to Jerusalem for Passover, I brought this with me. I don't know why, but something tugged at my heart as we walked out to travel here that day. Something told me that this cloth would comfort me. So I ran back inside and opened the basket where it lay hidden. I tucked it up under my clothing next to my heart so I wouldn't lose it. It looks like a faded old cloth, a rag that you would use to mop up spills or scour pots. But to me, it's a token, a reminder that my Lord had a plan for my son, his son. That much I knew. You see, this is the cloth that I used to wrap him in the night he was born. The night we stumbled into that stable. The night the star stopped over the place where I laid him in that manger. The shepherds came. The angels sang. My heart fell in love with the baby boy and broke at the same time. Because I knew that I could never keep him. Oh, I kept a lock of his hair, and I kept the wooden stool that he made for me. And I kept this cloth. I kept all these things, treasured my memories. But I knew that I could never keep him. Not the way that I wanted to. My son will die today. They'll kill him on a cross. All these years, I was afraid that I would lose him. All these years, I was afraid of what must come. But now I know that my son was born for this day. Oh, my son, flesh of my flesh, heart of my heart, let me die with you. May it be done to me as you have said.
It's just, it's not hot, it's just
One dark and rainy night in a small town in upstate New York, two lost and very young lonely souls came together. A seed was planted. a child of God at age 15, bearing a child. A baby boy was born. The years passed. Tony was age 15. He had grown into a fine young teenager. He enjoyed doing what most young boys enjoyed at that time: riding bikes, doing jumps, even jumping off the dock into the water, I was later informed. He also enjoyed music. His favorite band was Led Zeppelin. His sisters talked him into a musical that they were performing in that year. And he was a fine dancer. He was a natural. One night after supper, Tony complained of a headache and stiffness in his neck. As the night went on, he became more fearful that he had a very harsh pain in his neck. We decided we should go to the emergency room just in case, check things out, make sure it wasn't anything serious. We got to the hospital in the ER, and they did test, looked him over. Probably the flu, they said. Go home and rest, and we'll give you the results of the blood test tomorrow. We went home exhausted. Woke the next morning. I woke and I rushed into my son's room. I couldn't wake him up. He was groggy. I was scared. I called the hospital, told them what had happened. They said, bring him right in. I called my mom and my stepdad. Tony's father had passed away a year before. And they said they would be right over. Bob carried him into the car. We all got in the car and we raced to the emergency room. We got there and we explained what had happened the night before. I was so scared. It didn't look good. They were performing more tests. Later, my mom informed me that one of the nurses said, he's a very sick boy. That really scared me. I didn't know what to think. After some time, maybe 2 hours, Tony was put into a room, a private room by himself. As I was sitting there, I placed my hand on his chest. His heart was beating so fast. It was really beating fast. And then I looked up at his face, and I saw in the corner of his eye, a tear was rolling down his cheek. And then I realized, I looked at him. He's not breathing! He's not breathing, I yelled. The medical staff came rushing in, calling his name, pounding on his chest. No response. They started hooking up tubes. At the time, I didn't know it, but my son had suffered full cardiac arrest. As the night went on, I don't know, it was a blur. The next day, family members and friends came in, comforting and praying with us. Please, God, please. I was wondering, when was Tony going to get better? 5 days had passed, no change in his condition. I wondered why and how I was functioning. I just didn't know what I was saying or what I was doing or what I was thinking. Everybody was there. Everybody was praying. Tony looked very peacefully laying in his hospital bed, even with the tubes hooked up to him. Full realization had not sunk in with me. Day 6, a nurse came into the room. She asked me, would you like to help wash your son? I said yes. I picked up an arm and I washed it. I picked up a leg and I washed it. They looked so strong and healthy. Today was the day that Tony turned 16. I remember gazing out the window of his room and seeing balloons off in the distance. red, yellow, blue. It was a fine day, a beautiful sunny day for the balloon festival. The next morning I walked into his room and I saw a chart hanging at the end of his bed. I picked it up, I read it. It said, condition grave. I knew. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. I just knew it was bad, the word grave. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. The next day, I walked into my son's room. His color was ashen and white. It was then that I knew that he had left his earthly body to be with Jesus. I was heartbroken. I was sad. I was mad. God, how could you do this? How could you let this happen? Years had passed. 14 years later, after partying and dancing with the devil, I then one day got the call. I had heard about the calling. I had heard other people speak of it before. And it was a feeling in me that was so strong. I was thinking about it every day. I was feeling it every day. I could not deny it. I wanted back into the fold. It would be another 18 months before I was ready to make peace with God and accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I then knew that only God could fill the void in my heart. Do not give up. Be patient. When things in your life seem hopeless, do not give up. Open your heart to Him. He will always be there for you. Have faith in Him. Embrace Him. I'm at peace now. Tony, you are here, locked in my heart, safe forever. I'm at peace now.